If your nervous system is alerting you that you're in harm's way, that something's not quite right, it's important that you listen, because healing begins when our nervous system, when our body is treated as a messenger and not a problem. Okay? Your nervous system is a messenger, not a problem, because it remembers. And its primary job is to take care of you. Hey y'all, it's Dr. LaLa. Welcome back to another episode of the RE3Volve Podcast. This is the place where believers meet at the intersection of grief, loss, and transition to explore how faith helps along the way, because grief and loss are a journey and not a final destination. How y'all doing today? So today, let's talk about something that we don't talk about too often, and that's how grief and loss and transition get stored in our bodies. How our nervous systems remember things that our mind may have forgotten. Sometimes we have a visceral response to a certain smell, time, a place, right? We have a response to it even before our thoughts form. And that is because trauma is stored in sensations and not in the event, not the story, but how you felt when that thing happened, right? And so sometimes you may not remember all the details of what happened, but you remember exactly how you felt in the moment. And that's because even though our minds may not remember all of those specific details, our nervous system remembers what it felt like when it went into defense mode. It knows what it felt like when it was alerted that you needed protection in some way. Right? Our bodies remember. So let's talk about how they remember. They remember because our nervous systems hold those feelings, right? Our nervous systems hold and recognize tension. They recognize when something or someone makes you afraid. It recognizes when you're hypervigilant, you know? It does that as a protective mechanism. One of the things I talk about often is when my dad died in the car accident. After that, Karys would lie awake at night until I came home. And I don't care what time of night it was, because I would go to the hospital and sit with mommy until my brother could come there. And so I would usually be at the hospital till 1 o'clock in the morning. So I would come home and Karys would be awake, sitting up in bed, waiting for me to get home. Why was she doing that? Because the night my daddy passed away, I had just put her to bed and he was killed in a car wreck. So for her, going to sleep was dangerous. It was scary. She had to stay awake until I got home, so she would know I was safe. And now, mind you, when this happened, baby was 4, had just turned 4, but she was still hypervigilant about my safety, because the last time she had been put to bed and we had to get her out of bed because my parents had been in a bad car wreck. So that was her nervous system trying to protect her. And as soon as I walked in the door and gave her night-night kisses, she would go right to sleep. But she could not sleep until I came home. For some folks, it looks like shutting down. They don't have the ability to function. Some folks have an exacerbated startle response. It's like everything catches them off guard. For some folks, it means that they practice avoidance. They don't want to engage. They don't want to address anything. Anything that may make them have to engage, they don't want to do that. Anything or anyone. For some folks, it's physical discomfort, headaches, muscle tension. Even some folks, chest pain. There is a such thing as broken heart syndrome. Our bodies remember. And this is why triggers happen. Because even though you might not be honest about how you feel about that thing that happened, your nervous system is going to tell the truth every time. Your nervous system is 100% honest 100% of the time. When it comes to how it responds to your lived experiences, it's honest with you because it's recording those moments when you feel overwhelmed. It reacts to those reminders of pain, discomfort, shame, embarrassment. It reminds you when you have unresolved pain. When something has hurt you and you refuse to acknowledge it. Excuse me. When you refuse to face that thing that almost broke you. Our bodies carry that with us. And there is a certain amount of debt that we pay physically, mentally, emotionally, when we don't address the hurt and the pain and the trauma that we go through. And more often than not, when something triggers you, it's not the present that's the issue. It's something from your past. That's why it's a trigger. Something happened today that reminded your body of something that happened yesterday. For instance, after my parents' accident, whenever we would go down that road, I would automatically get like short of breath and my heart rate would speed up. And it did that for years. My heart rate would speed up and I would get short of breath. And it was at this particular spot, just as you would go up the hill and then get ready to go down. Just as I would start to go up, I would start feeling this way. And it would not ease up until I got past my parents' accident site. And I struggled with that for years. That location was a trigger for me for a very long time. And so it wasn't the fact that I was going up the hill that was the issue. The issue was the fact this is where my dad got killed and my mom got hurt. And that place was a reminder that my daddy wasn't there. And for a long time, we didn't know if my mom was going to survive. And so that place was a trigger. Right? So it wasn't the present that was the issue. It was the past. And so let's talk about triggers for just a second. I think it's important that we remember that the fact that something triggers you does not mean that something's wrong with you. This is not a failure on your part. It's important that you know that. This is not a sign of weakness. It's not that you're stuck. And it's definitely not a spiritual deficiency. The fact that something triggers you doesn't mean that you lack faith in God. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in him, right? Triggers are signals. They're letting us know that there is something that we need to address. Triggers are an invitation to actually take note of those things and address them. A trigger is a source of information. A trigger tells you something about yourself, right? Oftentimes, you might not even know that you have an unresolved thing until you get triggered. So that's a piece of information. These things tell us the things that we still need care. If something triggers you, that means we need to take care of it. That's a spot that's still tender. That's a spot that still hurts. That's a spot that we still need to see about. We need to go sit on that lady's couch and talk to her about it. So that these triggers don't prevent you from living a full life. Right? Because triggers often point to something deeper. There's usually something deeper going on when you're triggered by it. Sometimes it may be an unresolved memory, especially where it pertains to like loss. It may be that there was something that got left unsaid or something that got left undone. Triggers can often show us where we need to set a boundary. Because again, a boundary is for you. It's not for the next person. Boundaries govern how you behave, how you respond, how you react to any given situation, right? Triggers often point to a wound that needs attention. There's something that's still a little sore. It's still a little raw. We need to get help for it. Maybe it's a fear that you have that you need to get addressed. Right? Sometimes a trigger shows us where we need to have more compassion for ourselves. So in all of these instances, a trigger tells me something I need to know about me. Because ultimately, that thing or that person didn't trigger me, I was triggered. And my triggers are my responsibility. You know, something that I've had numerous conversations about around infertility, child loss, pregnancy. That can be a trigger for some people. And I won't lie to you. There was a season in life when it was triggering for me because I had a really hard time with pregnancy, with fertility. That was a full chapter in my life. I spent many, many days crying. And so it was triggering for me. But just because I was triggered didn't mean that the next person was required to manage my emotions around pregnancy and infertility. Now, do you hope that people would show compassion? Of course, but most people aren't out here intentionally being hurtful and hateful around these things. But it's unfair for me to expect that my friend who's pregnant not be happy and excited about the fact that she's expecting just because I'm having struggles. Because again, that's my trigger, right? And just because I'm sad for me doesn't mean I can't be happy for her. Does that make sense? Yeah, I can be sad for me and still be happy for her. And I'm telling you, in this particular instance, I'm telling you what I lived. Because with my son, there were 2 or 3 of my friends who were pregnant with me. Friends and relatives. My son passed away. Their babies are 10 and 11 years old. And so I know what that's like. But again, those are my triggers. And my triggers are my responsibility. Right? But even with triggers, healing is possible. And often that happens when our bodies are able to feel safe. And it shows up with our emotions being regulated. We're able to be emotionally aware. Once the healing process takes place, we're grounded. We're not so hypervigilant. We're not in fight or flight anymore. Sometimes when we're healing, breath work can be helpful. Learning how to breathe through it. Sometimes healing looks like boundaries. Sometimes that's what it looks like. And sometimes that may mean that you have to remove yourself from certain communities and environments for a time. Sometimes healing looks like showing compassion for yourself. Not beating yourself up during this journey of managing your triggers. Because it doesn't mean you're broken, you're human. And sometimes healing looks like you just need connection. Right? When you feel safe enough to reconnect and engage. Healing is a process. And the thing is, when we do these things and create spaces where our bodies feel safe, our minds are able to process. Because listen, when you're in fight or flight, all you can think about is getting to safety. That's it. You can't think about anything else except I need to get out of this place, right? When our bodies are safe, we're better able to process emotions. Because when we're in fight or flight, generally the only emotion we have is fear, right? Anxiety. But when we're safe, when our bodies know that we can rest here, we're able to process those emotions. When we're safe, we have space to release the trauma We have space to identify and navigate that journey to release. Because listen, healing is a journey. And while it would be nice to figure out the thing that traumatized you, you give it a name and you just let it go. That would be nice, but often that's not reality. It's a process to identify, to work through, and let go, right? And it's when we get to this space, healing becomes sustainable. We're able to sustain it. It's not something that just happens today, it's here today, and it's gone tomorrow. No. We're able to maintain it, and then we're able to build on it. Let's not forget that, because the reality is we're always going to be in seasons of grief, loss, and transition. The only constant in life is change. That's the only constant. Change. And so it's important that we learn how to manage these things, because they do stack on top of each other. It compounds. We're in different phases of grief and loss throughout our lives. And so it may be that, your parent passed away 6 months ago, and now you just found out that your wife is cheating on you. So you're grieving your parent who passed away 6 months ago, and now we're adding infidelity on top of that. So you're grieving two different things at two different levels. So learning how to manage and to navigate that. Because the reality is we're in and out of different phases throughout our lifetime. It's just a part of life, because again, the only constant is change. And oftentimes we talk about grief and loss in reference to death, but there are other things that we grieve. There are other feelings of loss, job loss, child loss, infertility, a dream deferred. Grief is a part of life. But it is possible to heal and for healing to be sustained. And our faith plays an important role in that. Faith is necessary. Romans 12:2 says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Renewal in this particular instance also applies to those patterns, those emotional and physical patterns that we have that produce those triggers. We have to work every day to renew our minds and to take thoughts captive. So those things that have happened to us don't hold us hostage and keep us from being able to live the life that is healed and filled with joy, because we're always on alert, right? Psalms 139:14 reads, "I will praise thee, for I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works, and that my soul knoweth right well." Listen, our nervous systems are a part of God's design. He created them this way for a reason. They protect us. It gives us reminders. It gives us warnings. It makes us aware. And that is intentional. right? And in therapy is where we learn tools to help us manage our emotions. It helps us to regulate our nervous systems because we can't heal what we can't identify, right? We have to be able to give it a name. And so in therapy, that's where we learn about our traumas and understand how to navigate them so that we can heal. This is where we learn how to process our emotions and how to ground in those moments when we're anxious or we're afraid. We learn how to recalibrate our nervous systems, right? This is where we learn how to navigate our triggers, how we learn how to handle them so that, again, we're not in fight or flight all the time. This is where we learn how to process those memories, because sometimes you have a trigger and you don't even know why it's a trigger. And in therapy is where you can dig into those layers so that you can identify it. Because again, we can't heal what we can't name. Therapy gives us a safe space where we can do that. It does. It allows us to reconnect with ourselves. Because sometimes when you've gone through things, you disconnect from your body and you lose the ability to do some things just because of the trauma that occurred. And you didn't even realize you stopped doing it, that you lost the capacity. And it was because of something that traumatized you or hurt you. And so you totally disconnected yourself. Therapy is also where you learn how to build safety for yourself. Physical safety, emotional safety, mental safety. Because you deserve safe environments. You're not obligated to remain in environments that are unsafe, mentally, physically, spiritually, or physically. You're not obligated to remain in spaces that are unsafe. And that's the amazing thing about our nervous system. Even though you might not understand, even though you might not be completely aware, your nervous system is. And when it alerts you, it's important that we learn how to pay attention to it so that we can identify it and so that we can heal it. Right? Because that's how we were created. And, before I close, I want to make sure that I say, because there is a difference between something triggering you, being a nervous system response, and the nervous system response of you in danger, girl. There's a difference. It's important that we know the difference between a trigger and a you in danger, girl. Right? So as we close, I want to encourage you to honor your body's wisdom. Because your nervous system, it remembers. And it will send you reminders. It will signal you that there is something that needs care. Your nervous system is a form of protection so that you don't stay in harm's way. And even if you won't tell yourself the truth, if you won't be honest with yourself, your nervous system will be honest with you. So if your nervous system is alerting you that you're in harm's way, that something's not quite right, it's important that you listen. Because healing begins when our nervous system, when our body is treated as a messenger and not a problem. Okay? Your nervous system is a messenger. not a problem, because it remembers. And its primary job is to take care of you. And so until next time, keep choosing healing, keep choosing joy. I love y'all. Bye.